welcome back to 40 Days of Prayer. We're looking at what happens when we meet with God. One of the things that happens when we meet with God is that our gratitude grows. Cicero said, "Gratitude is the parent of all virtues." Anthony Robbins, a self-help guru who sometimes stumbles onto biblical truth, made gratitude the beginning of his day. And all of his students, he makes that the beginning of their day. They're supposed to spend the first 5 minutes of their day being thankful and thanking somebody, he doesn't really say who, for what they have. What happens when you do that? Well, according to WebMD, when you're grateful, you reduce the stress in your life. WebMD says that stress is linked to nearly every leading cause of death, including heart disease, cancer, and stress is responsible for 90% of doctor visits. When you are grateful, WebMD says that your immune system also gets a boost. It helps people with AIDS, people going through surgery. There's a number of benefits of being grateful. Why is it that when you meet with God, you get grateful? What happens? Well, first of all, gratitude grows when you meet with God because this is how you ought to start your meeting with God. Psalm chapter 100 and verse 4, David, the Prince of Prayer, says this, "Enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him and praise his name." You know, this is how you should start your prayer life. Whenever you wake up in the morning and you begin to talk to God, you ought to spend the first 5 minutes just thanking God for maybe the top 10 things that he's done in your life that you're grateful for. Psalm 95 verse 2, David says again, "Come, let us come before him with thanksgiving and extol him with music and song." This is how you should start your time with the Lord. But gratitude grows also because we think about God's amazing acts, not only in our lives, but in other people's lives. He says in Psalm 111, verse 1, in the Living Bible, "Hallelujah! I want to express publicly before his people my heartfelt thanks to God for his mighty miracles. All who are thankful should ponder them." This is the fodder for how we come before God in prayer. It's thanking God for the things he's done throughout history, in the Bible, and then in our lives. What has God done in your life that you have not thanked him for? Maybe you've had some answers to prayer and you really haven't taken much time and said, "God, thank you for these things." These are things that you ought to bring before the Lord every day, and it changes our perspective. Psalm 40 in verse 16 gives the greatest reason why we ought to be thankful to God. He says in today's English version, "May all who come before you be glad and joyful. May all who are grateful for your salvation always say, 'How great is our God.'" He says people who are grateful for their salvation will say, "How great is our God." Have you thanked God for your salvation? Have you said, "Lord, without you, I would be literally lost. I'd be on my way to hell. I wouldn't have any idea where the light was." How much time do you spend thanking God for your salvation? That's a pretty big one. Well, last, when you meet with God, it changes our outlook. When you meet with God, your outlook changes because you realize you're not a victim, you're a victor. And you can be thankful in all circumstances. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 and verse 18, the Bible puts it this way. He says, "Give thanks in all circumstances." This is something that Robinson Crusoe did. Robinson Crusoe was shipwrecked on an island off the coast of Africa, and he made up a list. On one side, he put evil. On the other side, he put good. On the evil side, he says, "I'm all alone." On the good side, he says, "I'm alive." On the evil side, he says, "I don't have any clothes." On the good side, he says, "It's a pretty hot climate. I don't really need clothes." On the evil side, he said, "I have nothing to defend myself with." On the good side, he said, "It doesn't appear that there's any wild beasts here to harm me." And point by point, he found something to be thankful for. Yeah, there's something wrong, but yes, there's something to be thankful for. And it's really a matter of your perspective and if you're willing to thank God. You know, there's parts of Mexico where there's hot springs that come up naturally out of the ground. And there's parts of Mexico where right next to those, there's actually cold springs that come up out of the ground. One tour guide was showing some people who were visiting Mexico these hot springs and commenting that the women of the area would come and wash their clothes there because they could get their clothes hot and then they could rinse them out with the cold water. And one of the tourists said, you know, these women are probably so grateful to Mother Nature for providing this. And actually the tour guide said, well, they're actually not. Unfortunately, they grumble a lot because Mother Nature didn't provide any soap. Well, you know something? You can spend the rest of your life upset with God that He didn't provide soap. Or you can thank Him for the hot and cold running water. It just depends on your outlook. The more you meet with God, the more grateful you're going to be. And the more you begin your meeting with God with gratitude, the richer and the fuller and probably the healthier your life is going to be. Well, God bless you. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.